All right, in this calculator video, we're going to be looking at the z-test and the one-sample t-test. There's a slight difference between these two. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. But the z-test is you're going to use when you know the population standard deviation and your n is over 30. You're going to use the one-sample t-test when you don't know the population standard deviation or your n is under 30. So we're going to build two calculators on the same page. And one is going to be a z-test and the other is going to be a t-test. So let's go ahead and let's do the z-test first. The first one that comes up on the page. So the formula we've got here is you're going to take your sample mean and subtract it from your population mean. And that's going to be divided by the population standard deviation divided by the sample n. So what do we need to know? We need to know group mean, population mean, population standard deviation, and n. And what we get out is a z. All right, let's do our usual thing here. We're going to make this yellow. We're going to make these green. All right, let's put in some values for this. So for the group mean, let's make it 34. For the population mean, let's make it, I don't know, 30. For the population standard deviation, let's make it 12. For the group n, let's make it 36. Now we're going to construct the z. Well, we've got a couple different things going on here. First of all, we're going to want to put some parentheses down. We want parentheses around the x minus mu to make sure that that's done by itself. And we're also going to put some parentheses around the standard deviation divided by the square root of n. That should be good by itself, but you know, it never hurts to double up on your parentheses. Start with an equal sign. We always start with an equal sign. And then we're going to do our parentheses here. First is the group mean, and so that means we're going to go to cell B2, subtracted from our population mean, which is in cell C2. And now you can close your parentheses. We're going to divide that by the next group of parentheses. Population standard deviation is in D2. And that gets divided by, and here is where we run into some weird stuff. We saw this in the standard error of the mean. We need the square root. The square root is a command that Excel knows as sqrt. I always think looks like squirt, but squirt isn't a mathematical operation, so it has to be square root. So sqrt of n is in cell E2. You have to have parentheses after any command. So after sqrt, you're going to have an open parenthesis. Then you're putting the cell that you want to take the square root of. Then you have to close the parenthesis after that. And then you're closing the parenthesis for that bottom mathematical phrase. So you're going to have two parentheses right next to each other. Then you can go ahead and hit enter, and there's your z-score. Excellent. We can change some stuff and watch how it changes. So we can change the standard deviation, make it smaller, the z-score gets bigger. Make it larger, the z-score gets much smaller. Make the group n larger, and the z-score gets larger. Okay, well that was easy, right? If you want to find the p-value associated with this, check the tables that you either have in your book or in your PowerPoint notes. Okay, let's go to the t-test. The t-test is very similar. We're going to start with a group mean. That's what we need to know from this. Group mean. We need to know the population mean. But we don't know the population standard deviation, remember. So we're going to use the group standard deviation. And we're also going to use the group n. Okay, so let's make this a little bit larger so we can see all of what we've got here. There we go, group mean, population mean. All right, that's a little bit better. And here we're going to say t. All right, so group mean, let's do something similar here. We'll do 34, we'll do 30. Our group standard deviation is going to be a little bit wider, 27.2. And our group n, 21. Right, we're using t-test and we have an n less than 30. Now, the actual formula that we're going to type in here is pretty much identical. In fact, it's so identical that you could actually copy it down right from here. So you can go up here and Control-C and just paste this down here. It's the same formula. We're just putting in different things. The user input is different. So this is one you're going to have to keep an eye on. This one. It's, you know, the math is the same, but what you're putting in for your variables is different. We also have degrees of freedom. This is something you're going to need to know when you look in your table to find the p-value. The degrees of freedom is computed as n minus 1. And we don't, you don't really need to build a calculator for that because it's really easy to subtract 1 from a number. Like, you can see that your degrees of freedom is 20. But what the hell, let's just build a calculator here. So for degrees of freedom, we're going to take our group n, which is E5, and we're going to subtract 1. Maybe by having degrees of freedom here, it'll help you remember. You have to look for that when you're finding your p-value. So there we have the t-value, the z-value, the degrees of freedom. We can do something else. And what we can do is, now again, this is one of those things like if you are an advanced user and you want to add some cool extra functionality to your calculator, keep watching. If you are not a power user at Excel, you're done. You're good. This is going to help you get through life and you don't have to watch anymore. It's not going to hurt my feelings. So if you're still here, we're going to do something cool. In this Z calculator that we have here, we're going to add an if statement. And this if statement is going to say if, and then we're going to open our parentheses here. If, whoops, okay. If our group n, which is C, A, B, C, D, E2, if E2 is less than 30, we're going to say use t test. And then value if false is our z test. I think we need one more parenthesis here. Yeah, we do. And then hit enter. Okay. And so now it gives us the value that we want. But if we put the group in as 28, it's going to tell us that we need to use the t-test. So we've added in some foolproofness here to our test. And we can't do that really for the t-test because there's two reasons why we might use a t-test, right? We could use it if our n is under 30, but we might also be using it if our population standard deviation is unknown. And we can't really tell if the population standard deviation is unknown from the data. So we can't really say like, hey, dummy, use the z-test right here. And we also can't tell ourselves, hey dummy, you need to use the t-test by the number that we put into population standard deviation. That's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on. But we can add that little bit of extra functionality to it. Okay. You know what? I've been forgetting to do this on all of them, but it's going to drive me crazy. Let's put a border around it. Now it looks nice. Okay, excellent. There are ways, if you remember from doing this in class, there are ways that we can get the p-value from Excel. And the problem with that is the way that I'm doing it is giving us the two-tailed p-value every time. And I don't want you to rely on the two-tailed p-value because that's not always what you're going to be looking for in the exam. It's not always the two-tailed p-value. So you should be aware of the number of tails that the exam is asking you for, and then you should use the table in your book. Now, I will show you how to put in the two-tailed thing later. I'll give you a different video so that after this class, if you want to have these calculators on hand, if you're going to do any sort of work like this, you can actually have the two-tailed value that you're going to need. But for now, you need to keep an eye on that for the exam and just use the tables in the book or that you have from your PowerPoint notes. Okay, I'm going to see you in the next calculator video, and this is about where the exam comes in, so good luck on the exam.